Greetings to everyone. I, Komal, History Faculty, welcome you all to the official YouTube channel of SRN International School, Jagatpura, Jaipur. Students, as you all know, boards are approaching and this is the time of anxiety and fear. And many of you must be thinking what types of question will come. So here is a solution. SRN International School has come up with another series, that is sample paper series. And now we are going to today solve a sample paper of history subject. So students, as you all know that in any examination you get general instructions first, and I'll be explaining you the same. So whole paper would be of 6 sections in total. There would be 6 sections and each section would be having different sets of questions with different marking scheme. Let us see very first section number A. In section number A you would be getting 16 questions outrightly, which would be of objective type. You can see here they would be of objective type questions and they would be carrying 1 mark each, which makes section A of 16 marks. Then we'll see section B. Now section B has 3 questions. Question number 17, question number 18 and question number 19. These 3 questions are source based or case based. In each question you would be having 4 subparts. And out of these 4 you are allowed to attempt only 3. So in 17 you have to attempt 3 questions, in 18 you have to attempt 3 questions, and in 19 you have to attempt 3 questions, which makes section B of total 9 marks. 3, 1 mark each, 3 into 3 plus 3 plus 3, that is 9 marks. So section A plus section A we will see 16 marks. After that section B, that is of 9 marks. This makes them 25 marks. I hope that is clear to all of you. Let us move towards section number C. In section number C, you will have to see that there would be 3 questions. There would be 4 questions actually, 20, 21, 22 and 23. And these 4 questions, each question will be carrying 3 mark each. So that makes section C as of 12 marks. As you can see here, there would be 20 questions, 20, 21, 22 and 23. Each question is of 3 marks, so 3 into 4, that is 12 marks. Now the thing which you need to take care of is that the answers should not exceed 100 words. Even if you are left with your answer like you want to exceed it, you can't exceed it more than 120 words. You have to keep this thing into your minds and prefer writing this answer into the points. This is always appreciable in history. Now we'll move towards section number D. As you can see in section D, there would be 4 questions, 3 questions, 25 and 26. Each question would be of 8 marks. This makes this section of 24 marks. Now these 8 mark questions, they are the long answer type and they should not exceed 350 words and are exceed the limit, I can say it cannot exceed 400 words. This is the last limit. Next we'll move towards section E. Now sections E is having again 3 questions, 27, 28 and 29. These are again source based questions, as I will tell you, and they would be carrying 5 marks each. For 27 there are only 5 marks, for 28 there are 5 marks, for 29 there are 5 marks. So this section is of totally 15 marks section. Section E is of 15 marks. Now in these questions you will again get a few of the questions beneath the whole passage. Now this would be an answer writing section. There would be no objective type, but it would be an answer type question. Now when we'll come to section F is of map based question. As you all can see, it's a map based question. And in this map based question you would be having two questions all in all, and both the questions would be carrying 5 marks, not 15, 5 marks, total of 5 marks. And when we'll calculate whole of these, we'll get that the paper becomes 80 marks. I hope the blueprint of the paper is clear to all of you. So let us start doing the paper. Now very first question is asking for, by 1800 BCE in which region most of the mature of the Harappan sites had been abandoned. Now the answer to this question would be Cholistan. We know Banavali, Lothal and Rakhigari. These were, in comparison to Cholistan, they were new sites. Also, these were agriculturally fit. In Lothal, we know there was extreme trade and commerce. This is no E. There was extreme trade and commerce. All these sites were having very fertile soil. And we all know population always tries to stay where there are more employment opportunities, and these three were bundle of that. And that is why what happened from Cholistan and from the desert area of Indus Valley civilization, people started migrating towards these sites, and there was a population explosion into these sites, and that is why Cholistan became abandoned. I hope the answer is clear to all of you. Now, we can also say that these were the new sites. Now we'll see question number 2. Who was the court poet of Samudragupta? Answer is very simple, Hari Sen. Now Hari Sen was the cultural poet, and he was a Sanskrit poet as well, and he was related to the 4th century. I'll write here, he was a Sanskrit poet and he was related to 4th century. Now we'll see Kalidas. Let me change pen's color. Kalidas. Now we'll see Kalidas was the court poet of Vikramaditya. Bhanbhat, he was the court poet of Harshvardhana, the great king of India. And Amar Singh, if you will see, Amar Singh was no poet, he was basically a ruler of Rajasthan. I hope these things are clear to all of you, and you will see we are not only just doing one question by telling you with the by playing with the option. I can tell you that I have prepared you with the 4 questions. Now you are knowing about Lothal's identity, trade and commerce, Rakhigari and Banavali very famous for agriculture, Cholistan a desert area, then you know about Kalidas king, then who was Bhanbhat and who was his king, and Hari Sen was the question only, and he was a Sanskrit poet, which can come into your objective type question, and in which century he was there. So by doing or by playing with the options, we are doing in one question we are able to do 4 questions. I hope that is clear to all of you. Next question says is about when was Manusmriti compiled. Now we'll understand this thing. Manusmriti, it is basically the ancient law book of Hindus. Now this ancient law book of Hindus, it governed the 4 Varnas functioning. We know 4 Varnas: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudras. Brahmanas were responsible for the worshipping, Kshatriyas for protection, Vaishyas for trading, and Shudras were the life skill people. They used to do pottery, you can say bead making, bangle making, cleaning, etc. So, when this Manusmriti was compiled, the answer to this question would be 200 BCE to 200 CE. Next question is asking us about, as per the rule of Gotra, we have two types of things. First of all, we have assertion and then we are having reason. Assertion is basically the statement type of thing. We are given a statement and we have to see that the reason which is given, it is connected to it or not. Women assumed Gotra of her husband in place of a father after marriage. So this one is really correct, because as you all know, in the today's Hindu society as well, women, they used to leave their father's name behind and they used to continue with her husband's surname and with her husband's Gotra. Reason: member of the Gotras, same Gotras basically, were allowed to marry in the same Gotra only. No, this is incorrect. As we all know, people belonging to the same Gotra, they are not allowed to marry each other. So the answer to this question would be only A is correct. Now let us see another one. Let us move towards question number 5. And now the question number 5 is related to stupa. We all know that the stupa is basically a Buddhist architecture. It is very famous in India, and very first king who built it was our great emperor Ashoka, the great king. He built great stupa in India. You should remember it whenever someone is asking for you for the stupas. So you should know this basic introduction of it. Now the question is, what is the balcony like structure on the stupa that represented abode of the god? Now first of all, we have to understand what is abode of god. Abode of god is where god lies. Where God lies or where God stays, that is the abode of God. Now it is asking, now we have three different types of structures. One, it is here, another one is here, and third one is this. Now we'll see, it is asking this balcony like structure. This is the structure question is asking about, which is also known as abode of God, what it is called. So the answer to this question would be Harmeka. Now I'll explain you what all these things are. First of all, a stupa is a hemispherical structure, as you all can see here, from here to here, that is a hemispherical structure. And this hemispherical structure is known as and. Now above it there is a balcony. This balcony, as we have already discussed, it is known as Harmeka. And above it you can see there is a mast type of structure. This mast is known as Yashti. This is the information of stupa. I guess you all understood it well. Now we'll move towards the next question. And if you're making notes of it, that would be really great, because this would be helping you out for your examination a lot. Now question asked for, which book is known as Tamil Ved? Now Tamil Ved, we know that this question has been taken from the chapter Bhakti movement, and in Bhakti movement the introduction of Southern Bhakti or the pattern of Southern Bhakti was, there were of two sects, there were basically two sects. We'll see in South India there were two sects. Very first was Alvars and another one was Nayanars. Alvars were the worshippers of Vishnu and Nayanars were the worshippers of Shiva. Now the answer to this question is Nalayira Divya Prabandhanam. This book, it is the compilation of 4,000 verses. There are more than 4,000 of verses, and these all were compiled by more than 12 Alvars. And I've already told you, Alvars are the one who are the worshippers of Lord Vishnu. Now I guess this had a clear impression of question in your mind. Now we'll move towards next question. In which battle Vijayanagar was defeated? Vijayanagar, as we all know, in southern rule we had three types of you can say dynasties: Cholas, Chalukyas, Pandavas, and one more, that is Cheras. Vijayanagar was one of such empire, and in which battle you will be knowing that the whole Vijayanagar empire was defeated. That was the answer of this question. The battle was Rakshasi Tangdi battle. This battle was also known as the Battle of Talikota. In this battle, the Deccan Sultan, he entered in the Vijayanagar Empire and he killed Dev Raya II. And with the killing of Dev Raya II, his son, they fled away from the Vijayanagar Empire, and this Dev Raya was killed, and that was the ending of Vijayanagar Empire. And the answer to this question would be Rakshasi Tangri. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now next question is, in reference of divine light, who inspired Abul Fazl to place Mughal kingship, basically the rule of Mughals, as the highest station in a book where he has mentioned the hierarchy of ruling. In that hierarchy he has mentioned Mughal kingship as the highest, and under whose guidance he has done that? In the guidance of Sihabuddin Suhawardi. The answer would be A. Abul Fazl, he placed Mughal kingship as the highest station in the hierarchy of objects, receiving the light emanating from the god, and that was the light which was emanating from the god. It was known as Farz-e-Izadi, and it was a concept which was given by the Iranian Sufi saint, and this Sihabuddin Suhawardi, he was that Iranian Sufi saint, and in D 1191 he gave this theory, and Abul Fazl was very much inspired by it, and he placed Mughal leadership or Mughal kingship as the highest station in his book. I hope this much is clear to all of you. Let us now move towards next question. Next question asks us about, when was pilgrimage tax abolished? So the answer to this question is very easy. 1563. Under the rule of Emperor Akbar, the pilgrimage tax for Hindus was abolished forever. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now let us see which temple was dedicated to the king and royal family only in the Vijayanagar Empire. Now the answer to this question is Hazar Ram temple. It was built in the 15th century by Dev Raya II. It was solemnly built by the Dev Raya, and it was built to dedicate this temple totally for the usage of kings and people of royal family. I'll tell you a few characteristics of this temple. This temple, it is having it means, like, if we'll go by the literal meaning of it, it says in this temple there are 1,000 Rams. Means there are 1,000 Rama, or there are 1,000 gods, and this also refers to the great or large number of Ramayana panels. And these Ramayana panels, they are there over the walls of the temple. And this temple is a masterpiece, and it is believed that it was the private temple of the royal kings and the royal family. I hope this question is clear to all. Now let us move towards the next question. That is, who were known as Ghantidars and Havaldars? Now the answer to this question is, they were known as the rich farmers of the Bengal. They were having a monopoly over the less powerful people, and they were the rich farmers of Bengal. They were also known as Jotedars. And they were the, as I've told you, they were the class of rich peasants who were the most powerful. And they, where they were situated in the North Bengal. In Bengal north, they were all established, and they were in different areas. They were known with the different names like Gantidars, Havaldars, Jotedars, Bargards, Mandals. These were their different names. I hope this is clear to all of you. Finally, we get a question from modern India. The question asks for who was the Governor General during the revolt of 1857. Now, 1857, this revolt, which we call the beginning, or we call it first war of independence, because before it none of the Indians were interested in independence. They were not revolting, they were just coping up with the British. The answer to this question is Lord Canning. Now 1857, we had a lot of reasons of it, and 12th standard, even if you're watching this video, then I would be asking you these reasons in class. Whenever I'll be coming to your class, I'll be asking you these reasons, so be prepared for it. This war is also known as White Mutiny, or it is also called as Sepoy Mutiny. Remember, these can come into your objective type questions. I hope you all are clear about it. Next question asks us about who was Sidhu Manji, and he was the leader of which revolt? So the answer to this question is very easy. He was the leader of Santhal revolt. Santhal revolt or Santhal rebellion, which is also known as Santhal, because it was somehow related to the Jharkhand and Bengal region. That is why in Santhal language it is also known as Santhal rebellion, and it is also in common languages it is known as Santhal Hool. Santhal Hool, remember it, it is important for your 1 mark question. It was the rebellion which was placed in Jharkhand, present day Jharkhand. Earlier that was the Bengal province only in the British time, Eastern India basically. And these people, peasants, it was a peasantry movement basically. They revolted against the zamindars. They revolted against the zamindars for the rightful redistribution of land. So this was the Santhal movement, and who led this movement? Sidhu Manji. And he was supported by various Santhal people, the people who were living in the belt of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. I hope this is clear to all of you. Let us move further. Next question is, which member of the Constituent Assembly was the constitutional advisor in Indian government? Very simple question. It is B.N. Rao, and he was the very first person from India who represented India in the International Court of Justice. Now this International Court of Justice, it is situated in Hague, Netherlands, and he represented India in 1955. He was the very first judge from India, and he was the constitutional advisor, or by constitutional advisor I mean legal advisor of the Constituent Assembly. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now let us move towards next question. Next question asks us about who compiled a bunch of old letters. Before it, we have to understand Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He was a freedom fighter, and he spent most of his young days, or you can say the days when he was fighting for the independence, he was there in prison. And he had a powerful daughter who was known as, later she was known as Indira Gandhi, but earlier she was Indira Nehru only. When Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was there in prison, he used to write letters to Indira Gandhi, and Indira Gandhi used to revert back through letters only. And later on, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru himself compiled those letters, and he published a book known as A Bunch of Old Letters. Now, in these letters, Jawaharlal Nehru, he actually taught her politics, what politics is all about, how world goes, what is diplomacy, how things go, how to revolt, how to carry on any policy. These things were taught by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru to his daughter from prison itself only. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now we have reached the last question of this section, section number 8, 16th question. Now, which place was mentioned as Magan in Mesopotamian text? Mesopotamian text, it is related to Mesopotamia. Civilization. As we all know, parallelly to the Indus Valley civilization, in the areas of Europe and Greece, there was one civilization which was known as Mesopotamian civilization. Now, this civilization had one book, or you can say there were a few papers which were collected, and there was Mesopotamian text. And in this Mesopotamian city text, a city was called as Magan. And the answer to this question is Oman. Oman in the early Bronze Age. Early Bronze Age. The Oman, it was known as Magan. I hope you all understood this question. So as we all know that we are already on the section B of the question paper, and this is the source based types of question. This section is containing source based type of question. Now I'll be reading out the sources and then we'll continue with the questions. Of the great officers of some states, superintended the rivers, measured the land as is done in Egypt, and inspect the sluices by which water is let out from the main canals into their branches, so that every one may have equal supply of it. The same persons have charge also of the huntsmen, and are entrusted with the power of rewarding or punishing them according to the deserts. They collected the taxes and superintended the occupations connected with land as those of the woodcutters, the carpenters, the blacksmiths, and the miners. Now, this is the source written by Megasthenes. We all know Megasthenes wrote book Indica, and in whose dynasty he came? He came in the dynasty of Mauryan Empire. Now we will be seeing the questions. So now the very first question is asking about Megasthenes is referring to which empire? As I've already told you that Megasthenes was a traveler. He came to India in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, and he was an Egyptian. So, whose dynasty or whose empire he has described in the source? He has described Mauryan Empire. Now, this empire was compared to which country? It was compared to the Egypt country from which he came, and he was comparing the conservation water and the administration of, basically, the administration of Mauryans to Egyptians. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now let us move towards next question. Next question is related to why were sluices inspected? Before sluices, let me tell you what are sluices before this question. Imagine this is a canal. Canal, we know, artificial water channel. This is the canal and the water is flowing into this direction. Then to protect the water to get overflowed into the cities or into the area, what we do basically, we form a border here, this type of border, and in this border there are gates like this. These are the channels or these are the gates. Now these are the doors. These doors are opened and closed. Once they are opened, the water is allowed to flow from this direction to here. Like water can move out from here. Once they are closed, water remains still here only. The water is here only. So this is the concept of sluices. Now, why these sluices were inspected? For equal supply of water in all areas. Now we know that we are talking about the Mauryan Empire, as I've already told you. Mauryan Empire was very much famous for its strong and sound administration. They were having a great administration, and that is why Megasthenes was extremely impressed and he wrote such excerpt on the basis of the strong and sound administration of the Mauryan Empire. I hope this question is clear to all of you. Let us move towards next question. Which book was written by Megasthenes? The answer is very simple, Indica. Indica is the book which was written by Megasthenes, who was the traveler. It was the travel account of Megasthenes. I hope this is clear to all of you. Let us move towards next question. Finally, we are on question number 18. Now, this question is asking us about, again, an excerpt or source-based question. I'll read out this excerpt. Here is a composition attributed to Kabirji. Okay. Now, tell me, brother, how can there be no one Lord of the world but two? Now, we all know people in India, they keep on fighting about the gods, that my God is supreme and my God is supreme. Then Kabirji, he addressed whole population and he's asking, for one world, why do you think we need two gods? Because we are the world of humans, and if there is one world, only one God is sufficient. Then he says, who led you so astray? Astray means to get off the right path, to get off the right path. So he's asking, he is addressing people and saying, what has been, which ideology has been so effective that you have led yourself off the right path, you're on the wrong path. God is called by many names, names like Allah, Ram, Kareem, Keshav, Hari, Hazrat. God may be shaped into rings and bangles. Isn't it all gold the same? Now, Kabirji is explaining that God might have different types of names, but God is only one. As we know, women, they make gold bangles, they make gold earrings, gold sets, and everything. But do you think so? The metal changes if they are shaping the metal gold into earrings, bangles, or anything? Metal remains same, gold remains gold only. So similarly, even if we are calling gods from different names like Allah, Hari, Ram, Krishna, they all remain the divine power, the supreme power, one God. Kabir's distinctions are only words we invent. We have made the distinction, we have invented these words. There is no distinction between the powers. There is no distinction between the gods. Kabir says they are both mistaken. Neither can find the only Ram. One kills the goat, the other cows. They waste their lives in disputation. By the two worlds also, Kabir means Hindu and Muslims. And in this excerpt, he is talking about the Hindu-Muslim unity, and he says they both are mistaken. It's not just Muslims are promoting or propagating Allah. It's not about Hindu are propagating only God, but both of them are wrong at their own places, and neither can find the only Ram. Ram is basically for the God, and they are saying, Kabirji is saying, none of them, neither Hindus nor Muslims, can find God if they would continue like that. They both are sinners. They are killing the goat as well as cows, and that is why you can say goats are basically used for the sacrifices in India for Hindu community, and cows are killed by the Muslim people. So I am not pointing out to any community. It is what given by the Kabirji. They waste their lives in disputation. Kabirji is also saying that they are just fighting, they are creating disputes. None of them are following a religious and spiritual life, and he wants everyone to find one God, to exhibit a knowledge that there is one God only, and that is the supreme power, and both Hindu Muslims are run under that power only. Let us see the questions of this excerpt. Very first question asks, name the work in which these verses of Kabir have been compiled. The answer to this question is Adi Granth Sahib, a very simple question. How has Kabir described ultimate reality? The ultimate reality is one Lord. There are no two lords for the two different communities. We don't need two lords. We all are humans. Caste, religion, sect we have created. Now we have to understand that all humans are run by only one supreme power, that is one Lord. What is the name of the God? Now, what is the name of the God? All of these. It can be said Ram, he can be said by Hari, or he can be said by Allah. So, all of these names are the names of God. I hope these are clear to you. Now, the question number D of the excerpt. According to the poem, who two are mistaken? As I've already told you in the beginning of the excerpt, Kabirji is pointing out two communities, that is Hindu and Muslims. So the answer to this question would be second option, Hindu Muslims. And now he wants them to be united, and he wants that there should be no disputes in the mankind, and they should follow one Lord policy, that there is only one supreme power who is governing all of us. In the above passage, now there are certain questions. Very first is Mahatma Gandhi criticized. In the above passage, we have already read that Mahatma Gandhi have criticized machines a lot because these machines have displaced labor. Next is, what charkha could make a man? Charkha is the representation of being self-reliant by Mahatma Gandhi. So charkha can make, or charkha could have made a man self-reliant. So now next question is, what has machinery done with human? So the answer to this question would be all of these, because we all know that when laborers, they were not having money, they were not having jobs, they were becoming poor and they were becoming hungry. So the answer to this question would be all of these. Now what does saving labor mean? To give more work to laborers. Saving labor means to give more work to laborers. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now we have come to the part 3, that is part C, or section C of the paper. Now very first question is, what methods were invented to increase agriculture production in 6th century BCE? This question has been taken from second chapter, that is Kings, Farmers and the Towns. Now we'll see, to increase the agricultural production, there were two strategies basically which were adopted. Very first, that we shifted towards plough agriculture. Earlier there was agriculture which was not related to plowing, but now as there was increase in production, there was increase in population, people needed more agricultural produced, so they shifted towards the plough agriculture. And the iron tipped plowshare, it was used to turn the alluvial soil in the areas which had high rainfall. Second point, which second strategy which was used by these people, that was irrigation through wells, tanks, canals. These were started, these strategies were used to irrigate the fields now, and due to the good irrigation, the production also increased as agricultural crops were able to flourish more. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now we'll discuss about Vithala temple of the Vijayanagar. We all know, let me erase it so that I'll be able to have a board. Let me erase it for a second. Till then, you all recall what is where Vithala temple is located, and what are its significance in the southern history. Okay. Now, when we talk about Vithala temple, we know that Vithala temple is in it principal deity in Vithala temple is Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is being worshipped a lot. Then it has this temple. It has a lot of walls and a lot of halls as well. There are a lot of halls, and there is a unique shrine, and this shrine is in the shape of chariot. Also, there is a characteristic feature of the temple complexes is the chariot streets, basically that are extended from the temple Gopuram in a straight line. So that is also its distinctive features. And in 3 marks question, 3 points are more than enough. Now we'll move towards next question. Describe the relation of Bhakti saint of South with state. Let me rub it again. Till then, I'll tell you that the Bhakti movement in South India, it was initiated by two sects, and that two sects are known as Alvars and Nayanars. Alvars, as you all know, they were the worshippers of Vishnu, and Nayanars, they were the worshippers of Nayanars were the worshippers of Shiva. So they have started the movement, and it was launched under the leadership of two. And whenever these Alvars and Nayanars traveled, wherever they have traveled, they declared some sacred places as the abode of God and towards their respective deities. Later on, large temples were constructed on these places, and all these places became the center of pilgrimage. And you can see, as big temples, these big temples were built by the royal kings only. So we can say that the Vijayanagar empire's rulers, they actually supported these bhakti movement saints. Then also the central point of the Tamil devotional creation was the opposition to Buddhism and Jainism, and the feeling of opposition is more distinct in the creation of saints belonging to the Nayanar saints. According to the historians, the main reason for their opposition was there is a competition between different religious communities to seek state patronage. Now we'll also see that the powerful Chola rulers, they've been powerful Chola rulers, they kept on supporting the bhakti movement, and they donated lands, they donated a lot of amount for these for this bhakti movement. Also we will see that there was one temple known as, like, it was a Shiva temple in Chidambaram, which was built by the ruler. Also, Thanjavur, there was one more temple, Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple, which was built by the Chola rulers. So you can see that Chola people, the rulers of Chola dynasty, they've supported the Bhakti movement throughout, and they were no lagging in behind. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now we'll see next question. Why zamindars defaulted in the payment? Now zamindars, before zamindari system was something like where zamindars were allowed to take out taxes from the riots. Riots, riots are basically the farmers or peasants. But now what happened? They defaulted on the payments because of the sunset law. Now this sunset law, what it made that it has given a declaration that high taxes has to be paid by the zamindars. Now high taxes, these high taxes were irrespective of the production, irrespective of the natural calamity. Even if you're not producing anything, you have to pay high taxes. Company wanted to increase their fund, so zamindars, they've suffered a lot. And when zamindars went to riots were already suffering a lot because they were not producing anything. So riots were not submitting the taxes, and zamindars were not able to submit it. And these company, basically the British company, it has it already fixed that zamindar has to acquire this much tax, and this fixed system was not suitable for zamindars, and they were not able to collect enough tax, and that is why they became defaulted on the payments. I hope this is clear to all of you. Let us move towards next slide. Now we have already come to the next part, that is our section D, and this section D contains, you can say, for each question you're assigned with 8 marks. I'll be telling you in the points in a very short how you can form the answer. Very first question is, what were the rules of livelihood set in Dharma Shastra for 4 Varnas? So in Dharma Shastra there are 4 Varnas: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, as I already told you, Vaishyas and Shudras. Now these communities were assigned with certain work. For example, Brahmanas, they were supposed to study the Vedas, they were supposed to worship the god, they were supposed to teach the different hymns and different Vedas to people. They were supposed to perform these sacrifices and get sacrifice performed from the Kshatriya and the rulers, and to receive and give gifts. This was the job of Brahmana. Kshatriyas, they were basically responsible for protecting and administrating anything which is related to the protection of people or to administer people, that was related with the Kshatriya clan. And they were the one who made sacrifices under the patronage of Brahmanas, and they gave always gifts to these Brahmins. Then comes Vaishyas, who were assigned for trade and commerce, solemnly trade and commerce. They were basically the fueling pipe of the economy, and they were supposed to do trade and commerce in the whole place. Shudras, they were basically the life skill workers, and these life skill workers, they were given one job to serve these 3 clans. The above 3 clans, the other above 3 varnas were to be served by Shudras only. So this is the Dharma Shastra, and these are the 4 varnas. And when we talk about what is the form of struggle beyond 4 clans, so we'll come to know that beyond these 4 clans, there was not at all, you cannot say that they were in unison, because Brahman always thought some people as the outcast people, or they thought that some of them were not eligible to worship, to go to the god, or they were not eligible to be counted as a community. Kshatriyas also had the same ideology. So we have to basically mention all these points here, that there was a continuous tussle between Brahmanas and Shudras, and Brahmanas also, they have come up with one more section of the society. That section of the society were known as untouchables, and they were treated very badly in the society. So the struggle which you need to write related to the untouchables, Harijans, and the class difference between Kshatriya, Shudra, Brahmana and Vaishyas. I hope this question is clear to all of you. Let us move towards next question. Next question is related to, explain Nirguna Bhakti tradition of Guru Nanak and Saguna Bhakti tradition of Mirabai. So we all know Bhakti has 2 types. As I've already told you in classes 12 standard many times, a Bhakti is only of 2 forms. One with attribute and another one is without attribute. A one which is with attribute is known as Saguna Bhakti, and another one which is without any attribute, that is known as Nirguna Bhakti. Mirabai was a follower of Sagun Bhakti, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he was the follower of Nirguna Bhakti. So every point of Nirguna and Saguna Bhakti can come here. Guru Nanak Ji, he used to believe in the karma ideology. If you do good with the people, good things will come up in your wheel as well. And Mirabai, she was totally a Krishna lover, and she depicted herself as the beloved of Krishna, as the you can say disciple of Krishna, and she wanted to become the she wanted to achieve that ecstatism through Krishna's bhakti only. And these point will come into this question, the tradition of Guru Nanak Dev's Nirguna Bhakti and Mirabai's Saguna Bhakti. I hope this question is also clear. Let us move towards next question. How was Mahatma Gandhi established as a public leader? Now, I won't be telling you any answer to this, but I'll be telling you in the points that in the starting in BHU, Banaras Hindu University, he started with a lecture. After that, he did satyagrahs in Ahmedabad, Kheda and Champaran. After that he went to non-cooperation movement, CDM, civil disobedience movement, Quit India movement. All these movements were there in India. But he became public leader because he was down to earth. He never depicted himself as a political leader. He always said that he is the leader of people. He wore dhoti. He had a very simple life. He actually lived, although he was very wealthy man, but he lived a life which was related to the common people, which was related to the simple people. He professed charkha. He was somebody who professed charkha, and he said that if you want to go for that, if you want to fight for the nation, you have to feel the pain of the nation. So the simple lifestyle, how he connected with the people, how he gave them a solution. Also, the philosophies of non-violence and satyagrah, it created him as the public leader. I hope this question is also clear to all of you. Now again we are over the source based questions, and now I will request all of you to read this, kindly pause this video and read the source first, and then whatever answer I am giving you, kindly go through them. First of all, what are saddle cones? A very simple answer to this question is they were the grinding and pounding utensils under the Harappan stage. When Harappan civilization was there, people started with the cooking, people started to eat, not they were not continuing with the raw food, but they started eating the cooked food, and for cooked food they needed utensils, and they were also eating cereals. So to grind and pound the cereals, they started making saddle querns. Now next question, how is the surface of grinding equipment? What does it indicate? Okay, so when we talk about the surface, it was very gritty surface which was made of the igneous rocks. Basically, these saddle cones, they were made of the igneous rocks, and they were very hard, and they were very, gritty, as I've already told you. And what does it indicate? It indicates that they were used for something, to grind something hard. So their hard usage is the sign that they were made gritty, they were made they were made with igneous rocks, and they were always like this. Saddle cones were convex, so that it could be easily dug down in the surface, so that whenever they are being rocked, it means when there is to and fro movement over it, it should not be disbalanced, and it should stay balanced. So these were convex in nature. Let us come to the next question. What are its two kinds? Grinding equipments and vessels were made of which thing? So let me clear it out just quickly, so that I'll be able to have a space to write. Now we will see that these two kinds were there. One was for grinding only. There were two types of saddle querns. One was basically for grinding, and another one was basically for pounding. So I'll try to make two. One was this for grinding, and it was a hollow space. People used to put their things and they used to grind it like this by moving the quern over it to and fro. And another one was like this. It was having more cavity, and they used to put stuff here and they used to keep on making it, they used to pound it, they used to grind the stuff, or they used to you can say pound the stuff by making continuous movements through a quern. So these are its two kinds. And grinding equipments and vessels were made of which thing? They were made of basically igneous rocks. I hope the question is clear to all of you. And they were made of igneous rocks, which is sandstone and etc. I hope this is clear to all of you. Let us move to next paragraph. Now next excerpt is from Darbare Akbari, written by Abul Fazl. And again the same practice, you all need to read the text, and till then I'll be solving the questions, and then you can continue with the video. How do we know about the Akbar's Darbar? Very first is Darbare Akbari. So Abul Fazl's text Darbare Akbari tells us about that how Akbar's Darbar was formed and what all things were used to there. Next is, how did the people of all classes used to notice the arrival of His Majesty? So the answer is in very first line. Whenever His Majesty holds the court, a large drum is beaten. Wait. A large drum is beaten, the sounds of which are accompanied by divine praise. In this manner, people of all castes receive the notice. So there used to be a large drum which used to get beaten up, and it was basically the sound which was made. It was accompanied with the divine praise as well, as we have seen in the movies also, that they take name that this and this is coming. So in this manner, people used to know that the darbar was already decorated, and now the more programs will be conducted. Now next question. Who were ready to perform their skill during the court time? We'll see that whole time skillful gladiators, wrestlers from all countries hold themselves in readiness. Singers, male and female, they used to wait. Clever jugglers, funny tumblers, they also used to anxiously wait. So these were the all artists who used to wait, very eagerly, so that they can come in up in front to Akbar, and they can also get rewarded for their art. I hope this paragraph is clear to all of you. It was very easy paragraph. Let us move towards the last paragraph. Last passage, students. So kindly pause the video first of all, read the passage, then turn on the video again and come back to the questions. What will be the consequences if minorities are isolated? So we know there was a debate going on 27th August 1947. Govind Ballabh Pant, he said that if these separate electorates were provided by under the Act of 1909, and we call them Separate Electorate Act. Now when it came in the picture, Govindji, he said that it will be a suicidal for minorities, because they are already minority, and when they would be provided a separate electorate, a separate place to live in, then what will happen? They would never be able to convert themselves into majority, as it is written here, and their religion, their culture, their traditions, they might get distorted. So, and this will also cripple down the feeling of frustration among them, and they would never be able to feel one as the nation. So this is the consequences if minorities would be isolated. The next question is related to what was ultimate objective according to Govind Ballabh Pant. So the ultimate objective of Govindji was that he wanted a one nation where one electorate should be there. It was not like he never wanted that if for Muslim people only Muslim leader can come up and Muslim people can vote, if for minorities leader can come up and minority can only vote. He didn't wanted that. He wanted a unison electorate and people to live in a similar community with united feeling. I hope this is clear to all of you. And lastly, we're going to do a map question. So now next question is related to map based question. On map we have to locate Mohenjo-daro, Sanchi, Lothal, Lumbini, and there are three places which are marked with ABC. We have to name these sites as well. So let us move towards next slide where map is there. As you all can see that I've already marked them down here. It is Mohenjo-daro, which is basically right now if we'll see, it's there in the Pakistan. Here it is Lothal, which is the part of Gujarat now. Then we'll see here, this is Lumbini. You'll tell me what is the significance of place Lumbini. And here in the Madhya Pradesh we'll see it is Sanchi. Now moving towards next, we were given three sites. It is very first was A, this one. This A is Kalibangan. Then we were given with B. B is Kheda, where Gandhiji had a movement for um, workers, for the agricultural peasants. Then C, we are having C as Kapilavastu. We all know Kapilvastu, it was one of the provinces of the Magadha Empire. So students, I hope you all get to know what kind of map you would be getting in your examination. So students, this was it for this sample paper. I hope you all had a clear understanding about the examination. Also, I hope that you had an enjoyable learning throughout the video. And for us, please like the video, comment down below, share the video and subscribe to our channel for community help. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all. Keep learning, keep growing.